We got the Cut to It Panthers quarterly report.
Quarterly
And
report.
yeah, quarterly report. And I have a guest in studio, Kyle Bailey with WFNZ, avid local Panthers savant. How about that?
That's Savant, huh?
Yeah, savant.
Panthers talker for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Sounding board for the fans, maybe.
Would you call yourself a sounding board
I get yelled at a lot, so I
or,
don't know.
or more of a therapy session?
Definitely that.
Yeah,
Definitely that. That's for sure.
yeah,
It's been that way all week. Actually, the last couple of weeks.
yeah. Summarize really what's going on here in Charlotte with the Panthers fans, with the Panthers, and really what you see with what's going on.
Anger and chaos.
Yeah.
2 words: anger and chaos.
Mm.
Now, again, I'd say that from the perspective of I literally hear from the fans every day at 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
right? So you get an idea of how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what the majority opinion is, what the predominant opinion is. But you also get really interesting stuff too. Some of it's crazy.
Mhm.
Some of it's fire everybody after 5 games, start over again.
Mhm.
Some of it's trade Bryce Young, the stuff that you kind of look at and you think, have you ever watched the NFL before? None of that stuff's possible or even going to happen. But no, it's been a really. I've been doing this for a long time.
How long?
Shoot, Steve. I've been in radio, a little bit of TV, the better part of 16 years.
Okay. Wow.
For most of the last 16 years. I don't know that I can compare this to anything else.
Hmm.
These first couple of weeks, and I think it's like an extension of, it, like 5 years of futility, if you will. You don't make the playoffs for 5 years. Now they're 0-5. No 0-5 teams ever made the playoffs.
Correct.
So, people are already looking at this. Okay, 6 straight years. It's just an extension of the same. And there's, some truth to that. Obviously, there's some things that aren't true about that. But, man, it's been wild to watch the reaction come in.
Yeah, it has been. And so the biggest question I have, right, is trying to formulate really with my team is um, the rundown, right? What do we do with this? You have Frank Wright who said this is not a rebuild. Um, I think it's kind of a rebuild. And then I kind of, and then I look and watch, and obviously watching the games, and the question comes out, and I think this is the title ball, right? Is it a reboot or retool?
I think the owner wants it to be a retool.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the owner wants to win. I think they all want to win. I mean,
Yes.
you're an athlete. These guys are competitors. They all want to win.
Do you believe fans really think that players want to win, or you think they are fans more innate to believe that the players are there 100% for the money and then maybe the win in the process?
I think it's a case by case basis. I think there are certain players, and certainly that guys. Let's say a guy got paid, right? We've seen cases of this before. Guys get paid, they don't look like the same player after. So they'll call out the obvious. They'll suspect that maybe a guy or two is doing that. But I think on the whole, fans believe that players want to win. You don't get to the NFL unless you're a competitive guy, right? I mean, some dudes are genetic freaks and they end up there just because they can be.
Yeah.
But most guys are they're there because they want to win. They're the ultimate competitors. So I think most fans get that. I think when you get caught up in the heat of debating what's wrong with a team and why things are the way they are and dwelling on the bad, you can easily slip into the really cynical side of oh, he doesn't care, he's just there for the money, he's cashing a check, look at him, he's just going through the motions. So you'll get some of that. But I think that fans, if you just sit them down and ask them rationally, do you think these players care and want to win, they'll say yeah.
Let's start with the good. Where would you put the Panthers defensively? Let's start with the secondary.
I think they're giving a lot of effort. I think that Ejiro Evero, the new DC, has done
a great job.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, when you consider what they've lost in that secondary,
yes.
JC, Xavier Woods, Dante Jackson didn't play on Sunday, and they got guys out there battling. And it looks like the Jamesons and certainly Sam Franklin that they know where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I'm watching Evero and I'm thinking, okay, I think he's as advertised. This guy knows how to run a defense for sure.
So would you look at the secondary as a reboot or retool?
I just think they're in bad straits right now. This is obviously, and you've made this point to me before, guys get hurt in football. It's a dangerous collision sport. So you go into every season with a built-in expectation that you're going to lose some guys, right? And that's what quality depth's for. You got to have dudes that can step up, next man up, and all that. So I think that if we were looking at a secondary that still had J.C. Horn and Xavier Woods, and had Dante on Sunday, I think I'm forgetting somebody as a matter of fact, but I mean, I think you're looking at some different performances, but you got to give credit to the guys that are out there because
Yeah.
they looked well coached, ready to play, and they gave a lot of effort.
Sam Franklin
Good football player.
Jr. primarily plays special teams, wanted his opportunity to play. Unfortunately, gets the opportunity because of injury. And I say unfortunately because you never want another player to be unavailable.
Mhm.
And, you get that Wally Pip, that opportunity. But I'm looking at this secondary. They lack depth,
They do.
right? We've never really seen a J.C. Horn and a Dante Jackson play multiple games together because of health.
Right.
And it's not necessarily because they don't want to play or they have zero desire to play. As this season progresses, what do you say happens to the secondary? Because you have Dante Jackson, who I believe his contract's going to be up,
I think
right?
so. Yeah.
JC Horn, who's under his rookie contract. So you still have to wait and see with all the injuries that he sustained. Broken foot. You can't train for hey, let me break my foot, right? There's no what do you do? The best you can do is take calcium pills. There's really nothing you can do for misstepping, bang, I think Liz Frank or something, a broken foot. But then now you have the hamstring. These guys, we haven't seen how good they can really be. So what do you do in this secondary? Xavier Woods, he's getting older.
Yeah.
You got Vaughn, he's come in from Cincinnati. He's making a hell of an impact. And then you have Jeremy Chin, who he's the big nickel. But in the big nickel, how do you see Jeremy Chin? Because I see Jeremy Chin as more of a Jamal Adams, more presence in the run game,
Yeah.
less presence in coverage. Just because I think he's just so big and burly, he dissects plays in the run game. But I think sometimes maybe doesn't have the same doesn't appear in the coverage game as well as he does in the run game.
No, I think the people, we've had people say that to me on the air, and I think there are a lot of folks who feel like, okay, is Jeremy Chin, and we've been hearing this for years, is he best suited at linebacker because of those traits that you just mentioned? Is he a guy that is so much better in the box and is so physical, like that Jamal Adams type you're talking about?
I think he reminds me of just Thomas Davis.
Yeah,
drafted as a safety.
Yeah,
but had the body frame and built his body frame to play linebacker, and actually became a heck of a coverage linebacker.
Yeah.
Than he was as safety.
It's funny you say that because I was standing next to TD in the tunnel like 2 weeks ago on Monday Night Football, and I was reminded how big a guy TD is.
Yeah.
And in my head, I didn't see Jeremy Chin as being the same stature of athlete. And then he walks by and it's like, oh, he actually is pretty big.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that I didn't, but you just don't see them the same way. But I think you're onto something. I think that, whether it's this place, this staff, or somebody else, I do think that he's going to be geared toward playing more that way for the rest of his career with all the tape that's out there.
And he's a heck of a football player.
Oh, he hits you. I mean, he'll hit you. He's not afraid of contact at all. I think that because he's been all over the place in the first couple of years, that he might have lost some opportunity to really settle in right away.
Yeah.
But he's still young enough he can do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you allow Dante Jackson to walk or stay? Or do you let the season kind of show itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Dante's been a good team guy since he's been here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people like Dante. Yeah. He's given them.
He's well liked.
He's well liked, and I think
when he's on the field,
and he's gotten quieter and done more of letting his play do the talking over the last couple of years, right? He was really yappy when he first got here, right? A lot of young pups are. So, nothing wrong with that. But I've noticed that he's quieted down the last couple of years. I've noticed he's more willing to stick his head in there, and put a hit on somebody than maybe he was earlier in his career, knowing that he had to do that. I think you raised that point early in his career.
Yeah.
If you can keep Dante Jackson, I'd like to, because Dante can still really run. And you need dudes who can run with some of these fast wide receivers, and Dante can do that. So obviously, as with any negotiation or personnel decision, you got to make sure it makes sense for both sides. And if you're Samir Suleiman with the Panthers and Scott Fitterer, you got to make sure financially it makes sense for Carolina. But if it does, absolutely bring Dante Jackson back, no doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go down to this linebacker core. Linebacker core is outstanding. You got Shaq, who's unfortunately hurt. He goes out there, but he resigns with an adjustment on his contract. So you're down. You're your linebacker, and then Frankie Luvu, the steal uh, of the century right now
Yeah.
for the Carolina Panthers.
Best scouting job they've done in 3 years.
Oh my goodness! And the way Frankie Luvu is playing, it's hard to say that does Frankie stay just because the way he's playing, someone's going to look at Frankie and say, "Hey, I really would love to test out the free agent market. Let me see what I do." Look at this play right here. Frankie Luvu is gonna go ahead and just shows his impact in the game, right? He'll hit you, chase you down, cause a fumble, just impacts the game in a way. Blitzing, coverage, can cover you. He could do it all. Blitz.
And he wants to be that guy.
Yes.
He wants to be that guy. And I think that's a product of, and I think obviously you played a different position, but guys like you who come up knowing I got to fight for a spot on the roster. I got to fight for a place in the NFL. You see that manifested on a football field with the way that he plays, right? He hits you. He keeps coming. He doesn't want to come off the field. He knows where he's supposed to be. Like, that's a guy who's been living in his playbook, because when he got to the NFL, he knew he wasn't the best athlete on the field, but he had to be a good football player. And so you see that in the way that he plays. And again, it's the best scouting job they've done with this organization, I think, in 3 years, because he is a fantastic. The Jets discarded this guy like he couldn't play.
Yeah.
And look at him now.
It's hard to say take a hometown discount for a guy who probably this would be his biggest payday of his career.
I could never say that to someone. I could never suggest that somebody take a hometown discount, because at the end of the day, you got a family to feed.
Yeah.
You get one crack at this, maybe two if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So again, if you're the organization, you got to do right by him. Both sides have to come to an agreement that makes sense. But how could you ever ask Frankie Luvu to take a hometown discount? He ain't from here. He just became an American citizen a couple of weeks ago.
Edge rusher.
Yeah.
Brian Burns.
Ooh. Boy, that's a situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Clearly he took the approach this year that he's betting on himself, right? They couldn't come to a contract agreement. He was going to come in, it appears, with his sights set on, I'm going to show you why I'm worth $32 million a year, something along those lines. I'm just putting a number on it, but it's in that neighborhood. I don't think he's done that so far. I don't. I think we all know that Brian Burns is a good football player, and there are still 12 games left for him to, finish writing whatever chapter of this book that he wants to write. But, I've talked to a lot of people in the league. I've talked to people over there. My understanding is they've drawn a hard line in the sand on what they're willing to pay him right now. And unless he goes out there and changes their minds this year.
When you say go out and change their mind, what do you mean by that? And
sure.
I'm snickering because the line has been drawn in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a target that everybody wants, right, in every position, whether we like it or not. When you're paying for it, you can dislike the price, but you're either going to pay the price or you're not going to pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at edge rushers and what edge rushers are getting paid today, you look at Aaron Donald, Von Miller, who else? Nick Bosa, TJ Watt. These are guys who show up, and I'm not saying Brian Burns doesn't show up, but these are guys who show up in the pass game and in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
They impact the game. TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers. You look at TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. TJ Watt is, I think his pack, he did something. Didn't play for 4 or 5 games. And what happened to that defense? Didn't show up. All of a sudden he comes back. I've never seen last year one player, an edge rusher, impact the game with his absence and come back, and it's so apparent.
Yeah.
Before.
Well, look at the impact he had on Alex Highsmith on the other end, too.
Yes.
I mean, Alex Highsmith just got a really nice deal.
Yes.
But it's less than half of what Burns is asking for. And Alex Highsmith had 14 sacks last year. Brian Burns had 12 and a half. Right? So I only bring that up to say, to your point, TJ Watt has an impact. Yes. He opens things up for other people, right? I think you made this point on my show a couple of weeks ago that Burns has to be a guy. He's going to get doubled. Right?
Yes, he
Everybody
is.
knows he can play. Aaron Rodgers was singing this guy's praises on Hard Knocks, in the preseason. He's special. He's different.
He is.
He is. We see it athletically, right?
Yeah.
And I do think he's gotten better in the run game. He deserves credit for that, right? Because early on it was okay. He's a little light in the ass. Pardon my French. We can run at him. Well, he's beefed up, right? He's worked on that. I think he's what is he had a half dozen tackles for loss or more already this year. Like he's gotten better there. But is he able to beat these double teams and make that impact in the fourth quarter when you need him to? I don't think they've seen enough of that, to feel like, okay, we can pay him on par with Watt, with Bosa, and eventually whatever Micah Parsons is going to command down in Dallas, right? So they got a tough decision to make over there.
Would you say he's better than Michael Parsons?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I don't think you can say that.
No,
that's my opinion. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't think I can say that today.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say he's better than Michael Parsons on a consistent basis.
Sure.
I think he has the tools to maybe become better than.
Oh yeah, the tools have always been there for sure.
Yeah. But when you look at Michael Parsons and you look who's with him, the one thing that I think that really helped Brian Burns and I think is missing right now when I look at the edge rushers is 2 years ago when Brian Burns really started to show his worth.
Mm-hmm.
It was when he had a running mate, Hassan Reddick.
Yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't have a running mate, and so he doesn't have anyone that can really step up. Because if Brian Burns is getting double teamed, and I believe until last year, until a couple of weeks ago, I think Derek Brown was leading the team in tackles.
Derek Brown's playing with his hair on fire this
Yes,
year.
he is.
He's playing with his hair on fire. And I talked about this yesterday because somebody asked me, all right, Carolina looks like they're in dire straits. Looks like they're going to have to run to the pawn shop again this year and sell something, to get a first round pick back because they don't have one right now. Yeah. And somebody said, would you rather trade Brian Burns or Derek Brown?
Ooh.
And I said, for me right now, it's easy.
Is it?
I'm just in terms of, you know what I mean? Like, I think that because of the contract dispute with Brian Burns, like if his people are holding tight at a number that you don't feel comfortable paying, and you think that once again, you're in enough trouble where you're going to have to sell off an asset to get some draft capital back, to go find a number one wide receiver for your young quarterback. If you have to do that, which is debatable, if I have to pick between one of those two, I'm probably keeping Derek Brown right now. That's just me personally. I think Derek Brown fits in on Philly or San Francisco's defensive line just fine. I think Derek Brown's a monster. But I felt that way since he was a junior at Auburn. Like I felt that Derek Brown was a beast since he was a college football player. So it wouldn't be an easy decision, I guess. But if I had to pick one, I'm holding on to Derek Brown right now for sure.
So you use Brian Burns as the opportunity to get more equity for the future.
I think because of the circumstances.
Now in the open market, he's gonna get that contract
from somebody. In all likelihood, yes. Yeah. Should the Panthers be the one to do it? That's the question. And you could just as easily point at me and say, well, that doesn't make any sense because edge rusher is the more premium position. Yeah. Again, it's about the context and the situation, right? It's about the fact that he wants money. They don't want to give him. They're apparently not moving. They're not budging. So far in this, bet on himself year, he hasn't exactly exploded yet. And back to your original point, the guy on the opposite side of him, we thought Justin Houston was going to come in and, be a big impact, be a big difference maker. And I don't think we can say that to this point. I think Justin's an older player, right? Yeah. He skipped training camp, because he's in his 30s. Like, I don't know how much people expected of him. He's a very good football player. Yeah. He's, I think, one sack shy of being top 25 all time in the NFL history books. I mean, that speaks to just how good a football player Justin Houston is. But we haven't seen a massive impact so far this year on the other side. Not in the way that Reddick was making a couple of years ago opposite Brian Burns.
Yeah, Reddick he did such a good job and it thrusted Brian Burns in that position to be able to be looked at as a cornerstone.
Yep.
And now that his guy isn't there, all of a sudden, is he a cornerstone?
It's a tough question to answer.
Yeah.
It's one that I don't envy Scott Fitterer and Samir Suleiman for having to answer.
No, I don't. Let's move over to the offense now. This has been tough because you use everything that you use to get Bryce Young. Bryce Young comes out here and he's just been absorbing so much. And it's really tough because now in a couple of weeks, you got the conversation and debate, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud looks 10 times better. But people are always already talking about, oh, this guy's trash. He's not this. He's not that. When you look at C.J. Stroud and what the Houston Texans are able to do, what they're doing, and the difference with the Carolina Panthers, what do you believe is the difference?
Right now, coaching and play calling. Personally,
Okay.
for me, and well, you said it yesterday, and you were right, and it's always right in these situations. When things are bad,
Yes.
everything's bad.
Yes.
Right. It either looks bad, is bad, or at least it feels like it's bad.
Mhm.
Right. So, one of the things.
The waters are so muddy
Yes.
that nothing seems recoverable.
And why is that? It's the ultimate team game. You
Yeah.
need all the parts to work together. So when we hyper focus on, one player, one position, oftentimes we're wrong to do that because, usually it's a combination of things. But in this case, they got wide receivers running open down there in Houston. Tank Dell and Nico Collins are getting open.
Yeah.
I'll start with that. Panthers wide receivers did a better job of getting open on Sunday, and it showed in the box score. But their wide receivers are running open. Their offensive line is protecting C.J. Stroud consistently. I told you yesterday, and you know this, they were without 4 of their 5 starters week before last.
Yeah.
Didn't give up a sack. We haven't seen that yet here.
Well, here's the other thing, too, that probably don't want to admit. Maybe those guys are just better blockers than some of the guys here in Carolina. I tell you one guy that's missing that I really believe. Austin Corbett is the glue that keeps this offense together.
Yes.
And people didn't realize Tacklenberg, he's okay, right? Chandler Zavala, his injury, but even you remove the injury and you look at what he's on, he's a young guy. And people are expecting all of a sudden, you're drafted, you play 5 games in, we either gonna win a Super Bowl or like Puka Nacua. All of a sudden, he's on pace to be
the next Cooper Kupp.
No, not the Cooper Kupp. He's on pace to surpass Jerry Rice, who played 22 years.
But that's a good scouting job, right?
Yeah.
That's a good scouting job.
Yes.
And so, that goes back to personnel, roster management, roster building. I got frustrated a bit yesterday because, we've had this staggered situation in Carolina, right? They fire Ron Rivera. David Tepper comes in, fire Ron Rivera, but hold on to Marty Hurney. Hurney helps him hire Matt Rule. Matt Rule's the head coach. Then Marty Hurney gets fired. Then the general manager, Scott Fitterer, comes in. Then Matt Rule gets fired. So it's been staggered, one after the other. Nobody's come in together. So the frustrating thing, I think, for a lot of fans is you keep hearing things like, well, yeah, but Matt Rule had veto power. Matt Rule had control of the roster final say, which is true. But I said yesterday, I wish Carolina would just leak it to a reporter. Let us know who was the last player that Matt Rule had full control over so we can properly and adequately, evaluate the job that Scott Fitterer has done to this point. Because it speaks to exactly what you're saying. Maybe Houston just has better offensive line backups. Maybe Houston just has better, depth in other parts of the roster, and we didn't see it. Now, I know for a fact that, Houston was concerned about their roster depth before the year because I do check into other city sports talk radio. I want to know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I got friends in Houston, and they were concerned about their depth. Of course they were. They're starting over.
Yeah.
But it looks like they got some quality depth down there, and we can't say the same thing about Carolina.
They also had, I think at one point, they had 14 or 15 wide receivers on the roster. They had, and I'm not talking about veterans either. I'm talking about they had all kinds of young guys. Robert Woods was the oldest, but then they had some receivers that were 7th-round picks that had speed, that had 5th-round picks who had contested catches. Like they had every area of the box checked off on receivers that they wanted. And I just think here, when I look at the wide receivers for the Carolina Panthers, Adam Thielen's catching all the passes. TMJ doesn't get any snaps, and it's a big deal. But I don't find it, at the time when you asked me yesterday, it didn't process it. Then I was thinking about, I was going back in my memory going, how does that happen? You want to know how it happens? When you're trying to stay afloat and you're just trying to survive, you're already in the third quarter. You're down 30 to what? 30 to 10, 30 to 7?
I think it's 28-10 maybe.
28-10, you're down. And the third quarter is generally where things start to fall apart for the Carolina Panthers. When you're trying to survive, you're not sitting there going, okay, let me see if I got let me see if Lil TMJ and Ricky and Bobby and Mike.
You played enough today?
Yes, right? Because we're at the YMCA and everybody needs to get their run.
Right.
Because if not, you can't have snack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Doesn't that speak to overall game day management, though? And that's something I'm hearing a lot from fans right now, is that, okay, Frank was supposed to be the offensive guru to come in here with the quarterback and make everything right on the offensive side. Frank's calling plays, right?
Okay.
Frank's also the head coach, supposed to be in charge of game management, clock management, things like that. We've seen some of those things suffer already, like the Minnesota game. They burned 20 seconds off the clock with 2 timeouts at the end of the first half, where they could have run at least 2 more plays at the end of the first half. And the whole stadium's like, you're going to call timeout? You're going to call timeout? I mean, everybody's whispering the same thing, and they don't. Not knowing that TMJ hadn't played, calling a play for Adam Thielen, not knowing that he wasn't on the field. These things might be isolated incidents that, there's a reasonable explanation for it. But what fans see is a head coach who's trying to call plays and manage the game, and he's not doing either particularly well right now. That's the let's say narrative, if you want, that I'm getting from fans right now. And so, I look at Frank, and his biggest supporter, I think, in the NFL is in Philadelphia, a guy named Nick Sirianni. And, Nick's team was in the Super Bowl last year. But when Nick first took the job in Philly, I guess, 2 years ago, he was taking heat because he wouldn't give up play calling. And things weren't going well. And he finally relented and gave up play calling, gave it to Shane Steichen.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is history. I mean, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but they ended up in the Super Bowl. And so, maybe Frank takes a cue from that and gives it to Thomas Brown. And who knows? That might not help anything, right? I don't think a simple switch in play calling is going to be the silver bullet that suddenly, has them on a 5-game winning streak.
Yeah.
But again, when things are bad, everything's bad, to your point. So we're nitpicking play calling, game management, who should be doing it. And, they just got to get better offensively.
Yeah, they do. Tight ends. They have Hayden Hurst, but then you try to run a play with Ian Thomas.
Didn't get it.
Ian Thomas is, I believe the Carolina Panthers need a more well-rounded tight end.
Mm-hmm.
A guy, Ian Thomas is stellar in the run game, but he hasn't shown that consistency in the pass game. And so now you run a play that, to some degree, is, it makes some people question it. You run a screen to him. Hayden Hudson sees the screen, picks off, makes a fantastic play.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's not like Bryce threw it directly to him and it hit him off his face mask, popped up in the air.
No.
It was Then he throws a pick to Jonathan Mingo, run a quick out, because who was an underneath coverage grabber?
Yeah.
Ian Thomas. Doesn't see the corner back off, but the corner doesn't respect the route that Ian Thomas is running, because Ian Thomas is not known for running stellar routes. He's not known for yards after catch.
Yeah.
So he's actually becomes 10 on 11.
Yeah.
Well, with the quarterback, 9 on 11, because once the quarterback throws the ball, he is no longer a viable option in this offense, because he's the only delivering the football.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that was my problem too. And I got a little sarcastic about it on the internet, but that's what the internet's for. I was like, why is screen to Ian Thomas in your playbook right there? Like, why are you reaching for that? Like, you've already got a chaotic pocket. Your 2 guards are out, right? You're seeing Bryce take pressure up the middle, and he's already sped up because he's a rookie.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to take time for the game to slow down. You've made that point. So you're in a chaotic pocket already. Things are going fast. And you're dialing up that play for the blocking tight end, who's already got his hands full with Aiden Hutchinson, like you said, who made a spectacular play. He just did.
Yeah.
He read it. He lunged in, one-handed snap. You give him credit for that. I just didn't understand the play call. Like, if you want to run that play, isn't that why you brought Hayden Hurst in here?
Yes.
I would have thought anyway.
That's what I would have thought as well.
So it's hard for me when it comes to the quarterback, and I've already got some people that, like you said, Stroud's playing well. They picked the wrong quarterback. Bryce is a bust. He's too small. He's too this. He's too that. And I'm just like, first of all, unreasonable to write off a quarterback after his first year, much less a quarter of the way through his first year.
I love the stats. They said Troy Aikman, he was drafted his first year. I think he was 0-11 in the starts. Peyton Manning. I'm bringing all this up to say, just because a guy has a bad year, right, his rookie year, doesn't mean that he'll never ever.
Well, Peyton threw 28 picks.
Really?
28 interceptions.
Wow.
His rookie seasons. 28 interceptions. Something tells me Bryce isn't going to throw 28 picks this year. Peyton threw 3 in his first game. Andrew Luck threw 3 picks in his first game. Matt Stafford threw 3 picks in his first game.
I mean, it's a ton of quarterbacks throw picks.
Rookie quarterbacks throw the ball to the wrong team a lot.
Second-year players too.
Yeah.
Or rookies, their second year in the league,
Right.
but their first year actually starting, like a Sam Howell.
So you played at Utah. That's
Yes.
good college football. How much faster when you showed up for the very first time in the NFL? How big was that holy shit, this is really fast moment for you?
It was a number of times.
It was a number of times. It's a number of times, right?
Yeah.
Like, I never got to experience that, but I've been on the field with these guys for years. I see it.
Yeah.
It's really fast.
Yeah.
And so, didn't you? And I said this in the weeks going into the season. I was like, by the way, he's going to throw picks.
Yeah.
Prepare yourselves. He's going to throw the football to the wrong team. That's how this works for rookies. And I think some people forget that. And, the problem is, I think for me right now, as part of the conversation is, okay, CJ Stroud looks great. And if your argument is we should have taken CJ Stroud, I'll accept that because you're allowed your opinion.
Yeah.
But what's done is done.
Yeah.
And what CJ Stroud is doing in Houston has no impact on Bryce at this point. Carolina Panthers fans need Bryce Young to get better. And I think Bryce is getting better. I think Bryce has gotten better week over week, in spite of some things that are going against him right now. I thought he got rid of the ball quicker on Sunday.
Yeah.
I love some of the throws he's making over the middle. When he's got time to throw, his ball placement is unbelievable.
Yeah, it is.
He seems comfortable for the most part calling the offense. That pass to Tommy Tremble in the end zone, not a high degree of difficulty.
No.
But a lot of guys, they don't have the touch to get that, or as a rookie, they might panic and miss that one. He didn't. That's in his comfort zone. So, it's just funny to me because there are a lot of people in this market, and this, who loved Cam Newton, still love Cam Newton, right? Ardent Cam Newton supporters. And for years, after you left especially, they would say, well, Cam doesn't have enough weapons, or Cam doesn't have enough offensive line help. He doesn't have a number one. He doesn't have this. He doesn't have that. And at times that was true. But my message yesterday was, okay, if you were one of those, and I know some of you are, if you were the ones yelling Cam Newton needs this, Cam Newton didn't have that, then why on earth wouldn't you be arguing the same thing for Bryce Young, right? Because Bryce isn't Cam physically, right? Bryce was never going to show up and take over this league physically. So he needs the weapons. He needs the help. All these quarterbacks do. Tua Tagovailoa was a bust and the worst decision Miami had ever made 2 years ago, right? And now he's in the mix for league MVP.
Yeah.
So, you got to let some things play out.
Yeah. What do you think about? You hear people talking about they got to fire him. They got to let everybody go, and there is no one on this coaching staff. If you let Frank Wright go, you fire Scott Fitter, you do this. It doesn't change the players and the injuries that's happened.
No.
It doesn't change all of a sudden Bryce isn't going to throw for 600 yards the next week.
No, and the fire everybody stuff is so a year ago we watched David Tepper fire his first soccer manager after like 8 games with Charlotte FC, right? Yes. David Tepper's an aggressive guy. He's not afraid to make tough decisions. You might even call him impulsive. I'm sure he might push back against that a little bit, but a lot of owners are like that. So that said, would it shock me if somebody gets fired over the next couple of weeks? No, it would not. I think there's a decent chance somebody gets fired. Who that somebody is, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be the head coach.
Yeah,
they're not. You look like a dysfunctional organization to the nth degree if you fire Frank Reich after 6 weeks of football.
Yeah.
You just do, and it's what does that say about David Tepper's decision making as an owner? If you're already firing the coach that you handpicked after 6 weeks, so you can't do that. I think it's more likely that the general manager, ends up in that situation because look, at the end of the day, this organization right now is responsible for the fewest number of players drafted into the league in the National Football League. Jason from Over the Cap put this out about 6 weeks ago, but basically the number of players drafted by the Panthers who are either still on the roster or on another roster, they've got the fewest number in the NFL.
Wow.
Which speaks to they haven't drafted well at all for the last several years.
Yeah, but some of that, I don't think, Matt Rule is not a guy that seems to not micromanage.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And he's a micromanager for sure.
Yeah, and so...
Because he's a college football coach at heart.
Correct. And so college football coaches at heart, college football coaches overall, especially when you work for a college, you are a state employee.
Yes, you are.
And a powerful state employee.
Mm-hmm. And usually the highest paid state employee.
Yes, and you control a lot. You control literally more than the athletic director of that college.
Yep.
You control who's advertised on the tickets, programs, all of those things. Now you come to the NFL, that's a ticket office. They have their own departments.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is Matt Rule controlled a lot of that, and now to say that, well, all of a sudden after one full season or one full off season with Scott Fitterer being allowed to general manage,
Yeah.
right, control and construct a roster, because we've heard Frank Wright talk about, hey, I coach the players, the general manager picking the team. I think that's the first time we've really heard that before.
Yeah, they've had a non-traditional setup over there for a while, and I mean, I guess traditional is the best way to do it.
Yeah,
Or maybe it isn't. The best way to do it is just to win, right? So
yeah,
whatever works is what works.
yeah,
Um, so this is not me sitting here advocating for anybody in particular to be fired. It's just years of covering and monitoring and observing the NFL, and how sacrifices are made to fan bases sometimes, right, to atone for an 0-5 start.
yeah.
Bye weeks coming up, nobody would be shocked if somebody got fired.
Mm.
But I also won't be stunned if they don't, because you also don't want to look like a knee-jerk, reactionary, no-vision organization. And you will be accused of that if you do those sorts of things. So they're in a bad spot right now. Truthfully, the only thing that's going to make anybody feel any better is just win a couple of football games. Yeah. Find a way to beat Houston. Right, Miami's coming up this weekend.
Okay, let's look at the next two games. What do you think with Miami? That track meet come.
What do you do with that?
Thoughts and prayers?
T's and P's. T's and P's, Ajiro. Good luck to you. I mean, they're in such a good spot offensively. Miami.
Okay.
that they brought Chase Claypool in to tinker with him at tight end.
Oh, is he playing tight end?
They're going to try it.
Okay.
Because they don't need him at wide receiver. They don't.
They want to switch Claypool to tight end in Pittsburgh.
He's a big boy.
He said, "Nah, I'm good."
But he'll do it in Miami.
Why?
Because he knows McDaniels can make it work.
Yeah.
Or at least he probably does. He didn't have as much trust in Matt Canada, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're in such a good spot offensively that they can play around with things like Chase Claypool at tight end because they got enough already. But if that works, you can't cover all them dudes. Right, so
can Chase Claypool beat anybody?
I have no idea. Maybe a linebacker if they can find a way to make this work.
But the problem is he's a jump ball guy. You don't want to do a jump ball going across the middle.
Yeah, he's not a precise route runner.
No, he's not.
But hey, if you get him against zone and he can find soft spots in the zone over the middle, he might be able to eat in that offense.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's all theoretical at this point. But yeah, good luck to Carolina Sunday. I don't know how they manage that. But to me, the big one, I'm looking ahead to Houston. After all this Stroud talk, can you beat that team? Can Bryce go out and play well against Houston?
That defense is pretty darn good.
It is. But I think if you can go out and play well against Houston and beat Houston, that will soothe some hurt feelings around here, right? That will soothe some of we took the wrong guy, this was a mistake. I don't think it fixes everything. But if you can go out, look like a competent NFL operation, beat Houston, Bryce could play well against them, I think that would soften and quiet some of this stuff.
The last one, I think, is a big one. The running back position.
Ooh.
Chuba or Miles Sanders?
How about Laviska Shenault? See, I loved what they dialed up on that scoring drive the other day.
Yeah.
With Laviska. We've been begging for that. And that's where and traditionally in my job, because, I've been around sports my whole life, but I never played in the NFL. I've never called plays in the NFL. So you will almost never hear me going after play callers. Because I don't know what that secondary play is. I don't know what they sent the quarterback to the line with.
It's tough to do.
I don't know who the hot route is. I don't know who this. I mean, I don't know what the actual call. So I mean, to me, it's arrogant to get on there and say, well, he should have done this or that was a bad play call without actually knowing. But there are things you can look at and ask, why would you do that in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Why would? And so to me, it's just been. All right, you told us in the preseason that you can use Laviska Shenault like Deebo Samuel. He's got that kind of ability. And then you proceeded to not use him at all for the first couple of games. I understand you spent money on Miles. And Miles was a good running back in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But he also got to play off Jalen Hurts in the run game, which they don't have here. Jason Kelsey and company were opening up 4-lane highways for him to run through, which has not happened here so far. Yeah. And Chuba's been the more efficient. Chuba's been the most efficient running back so far this year.
He's gained some weight. He looks faster. Looks
he hits
more
the whole heart. He's decisive, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's the thing that Miles is not. Miles had the benefit of, of stutter stepping, of hesitating at the line of scrimmage because he had the hole. He had options to run through, right?
Yes.
Doesn't have that here. And so for
It's-
what they
it
have
put-
going
has
on now,
put the ball on the ground twice now.
and it's not good, right?
No.
So
Momentum killers.
You see Chuba, yes. You see Chuba do what he's done. And then you see when they have dialed up run plays for Laviska Shenault, not only have they worked, but he runs hard.
He does.
And he's not easy to bring down. Why aren't you going back to that well more often? I don't
Hmm.
understand. Like, I understand some of what we saw on that scoring drive with some misdirection, underneath handoff. You can't run that kind of stuff every time.
No.
But Shenault with the ball in his hands is difficult to bring down. And just like Chuba, there's not much hesitation. He's going to get positive yardage. So I wish they would utilize that a little bit more. I really do. I don't think fans don't want to hear this right now, and especially not from Frank. But I don't think they're that far off in terms of being a more productive offense if they would do more things in a row that make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Almost a little bit like trying to be too fancy.
Yeah.
We try to do things that trick the other team and ends up tricking ourselves.
Yes. Well, we outsmart ourselves, all of us, all the
Yeah.
time. I know I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, I'm an overthinker to the overthinking degree.
Oh yeah, you can sit there and 20 minutes later you realize you've just spent the last 20 minutes in your head doing nothing. You know what I mean? Waste a lot of time in your head. Yeah.
Emotional roller coaster.
Tons of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Standing in line for the roller coaster.
Oh yeah, you're standing in your kitchen and you've just spent 20 minutes breaking down shit that does not matter at all in your head whatsoever. And your wife is like, "You going to join us?" And it's like, it's just been me and me for a while. My bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, look, I get to be, like I said, to start the show. I get to be the sounding board for the fans. I get to have that conversation with the city. And the cool thing is, and this is it's a brag, but I'm happy to do it for my guys at FNZ. We're the number one talk station in Charlotte right now, the entire Charlotte region. I got dudes that tune in from your neck of the woods out in LA on the stream every day, transplanted Carolinians. I got people listening in Maine, in Oregon, overseas, who love this team. They care about this team. And so the numbers have reflected that for us over the last couple of months. Every metric, traditional ratings, podcast downloads, stream tap-ins, all of it through the roof. The excitement for this team coming in was in some ways unprecedented.
Yeah.
And now it feels like the bottom's fallen out in less than 5 weeks. And so, for us anyway, the panic and the chaos is still there on the phone lines every day. So that's good for business, I guess. But you can't let this continue for too long, because it was already bad enough last year in week 6. I think it was week 6, after San Francisco took over your stadium, that you fired the coach. Well, a couple of weeks ago, Minnesota fans took over your stadium.
Minnesota does travel well, though.
And maybe that's something that a lot of us didn't expect. I expect Dallas and Pittsburgh and Buffalo and teams I didn't expect Minnesota to come in here and take over.
Minnesota's starting to travel well. Minnesota, Green Bay obviously travels well. Las Vegas Raiders,
Yeah.
But Minnesota is really they travel well. They go all over, and they're a team that they're in every game.
Yeah.
They really are.
Oh, they are. I mean, offensively, they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
Now, that was the big disappointment for Carolina fans, was that defense was not good, and you couldn't score an offensive touchdown. Their defense outscored your offense in that game.
Yeah, they ran a lot of tees, stunts. They ran a lot of things that really got that offensive line cattywampus, really not really figuring out where and how and which way to go. And you allow Harrison Smith he looked like he was having a Pro Bowl year.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it was always 5 or 6 men dropping out and just seeing a lot of little things that just made the offense stall constantly over and over again, and to put that defense in a compromised situation. And again, a third quarter has been the kryptonite for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah. Harrison Smith walked off the field in the tunnel. I was standing there waiting, and I guess him and Thomas Davis know each other pretty well, and they were talking for a minute. And there was another case where I was like, that guy's bigger than I thought he was. Harrison Smith's not a big guy, but he's bigger than I thought he was. And he was a menace that night.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's Brian Flores' defense.
Yes.
He's going to pressure you and pressure you and pressure you until he wants you to say uncle, basically. Yeah. And there were some sacks that had to be registered to the quarterback that night because they had so many dudes on the line of scrimmage that were coming after him. And they didn't handle it.
No.
And that was a big time lesson for Bryce that night, I think. I mean, if he's who Panthers fans hope he is, he learned something that night about the NFL. So they just got to get better. Yeah, they got to get. They have the ability to get better. They've got winnable games, especially in the back half of the season. And while there, certainly were people who felt like they could contend for this division. And I don't blame anybody for feeling that way.
I thought so too. I did not expect Tampa Bay to be sitting where Tampa Bay is
No.
with the people that they have.
Right.
I assumed that New Orleans would play better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I look at Atlanta and everything that's going on, and people are upset that I had to say what I had to say about Desmond Ridder. But look, Desmond Ridder had a career day the other day. They get the win, 300 and something. The most yards he's passed, but their offense in passing the ball is still dead last.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They run the football, but you have to give credit where credit's due. Desmond Ridder's playing. He is managing that offense. And here's what I would say about managing that offense. That's not a knock. I would rather take somebody who understands their role and understands their responsibility than someone who doesn't understand their role and doesn't understand their responsibility.
Yeah. Well, that offense is predicated on running the football.
Yes, it is.
And the athlete. And we heard a ton about, positionless football coming into the season. Everybody's like, all right, bro, this isn't basketball. Stop. But they're making it work.
Yes.
And they took a lot of heat for drafting a running back in the top 10.
Yes.
And Bijan Robinson is something else.
Yes, he is.
When I saw him week 1 make 2 Panthers miss in the backfield, and then make 2 more dudes miss en route to a 25-yard run, I was like, oh, this is a bigger, faster Alvin Kamara, maybe. This is a problem.
And then he did it to the Green Bay Packers.
Yes.
He's doing it every week. So it's not like, the Carolina Panthers have poor defense. He's doing it to everybody.
Everybody. And I've been saying for a while now, too, when I was, some Panthers fans didn't like it. I said, listen, I get that you hate Atlanta, but Tar Heels fans should at least get this. Arthur Smith can coach. He's a good football coach. Now, they've yet to find him a big-time quarterback down there. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But he's making do with what they have. And they've got an identity.
Yes,
that's the big thing, man. They have an identity. They know what they want to do. They do it pretty well. They're not going to beat everybody, but they've built towards something. They've got athletes on that side of the ball. And, man, if they ever get a quarterback on top of it that can really sling that thing, I think the South's in trouble. But, for now, it's working for them. Yeah. Were they 3-3, I think? 2-3, 3-3?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
3-2?
They just won.
Yeah, 3-2, I guess, right?
3-2. Yeah.
So I think the division's a little better than some people anticipated.
I would say it is.
Yeah, but, I mean, the original point I was going to make was that the front office didn't help themselves in some of the expectations they set. When the general manager's telling the press a few months ago, we got a better roster than last year, a roster that won 7 games. We think we can drop Bryce in, and, he's this elite processor, and he's wise beyond his years, and we can drop him in and run the football and play defense and contend for this division. Well, people believed you.
Yeah.
And instead you're 0-5, right?
Well, here's what I do think he's wise beyond his years, because I think a young, immature first overall pick. Look at Mac Jones.
Ooh.
What you don't hear any of the team, you don't hear any of his camp leaking any information. You don't hear any of his camp saying, hey, I'm not giving this opportunity. I'm not giving that opportunity. There's no bad body language. He's not sitting at the podium.
No.
Right? That's where I think people are missing the small little nuggets that Bryce has given us in this 0-5. Terrible time right now. He's giving us nuggets that most teams, most players would not be doing at this time with the situation he's in right now.
No, he's handling it well.
Yeah.
I mean, he sounds like a young guy when he talks.
Yeah.
But that'll change. Everything else about him, though, he's mature. And one of the things that you turned me on to early on during the draft process, and it really made me look at him a different way, was that his father's a psychologist, a mental health professional.
Yep.
You can tell that Bryce came up in an environment where he understands himself and adversity and the process, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, better than most do.
Yeah.
So I don't think you've got a kid that's going to panic there, right? He's frustrated because he's used to winning.
Yes.
He's used to being able to figure it out. And right now, he's getting that welcome to the NFL moment where, okay, I've got to relearn how to do this in a sense because I've never done this before.
Yeah.
And so I think he's ultimately, so long as they don't screw up around him, I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
I really do. Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time, man. It's been good.
I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we'll check back in at the second quarter to see how things going, if improvement, or if we just talked ourselves into another tizzy.
Yeah.
So, man, Kyle Bailey, I appreciate you coming on, man. I'm Steve Smith Sr. This is Cut to It. and this is a Panthers version of the Quarterly Report.